riverside.
Welcome to Dance Talk with Joanne Carey, where the dance world connects, the conversations inspire, and where we are keeping them real. I'm your host, Joanne Carey, and today I am joined with Juliet Prowse. She is the niece of the famous, legendary, and iconic dancer Juliet Prowse. I'm delighted to have her here with me today. She is coming to us from South Africa. And so we're hoping the connection stays stable. She has just recently written a book called Juliet Prowse, Born to Dance. For those of you listening and not on video, I'm just holding up this beautiful cover of the book with a beautiful picture of Juliet Prowse on it. So I'm delighted to talk about her with her niece, named after her, Juliet Prowse. So welcome, Juliet, to Dance Talk.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here and talk about my aunt.
Yes, yes. So I just want to start right from the beginning with you and how you became her namesake. And at what point did you realize your aunt was famous? So if you could just give us a little background about that, you.
Okay. So, obviously I was named after her, and how that came about, I think, is that it's my dad's only sister, my only aunt. And so when I was born, he wanted to name me after her. And it's been actually a wonderful big experience to be named after someone who was very well known in South Africa. Let's call her famous in South Africa. I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and she would come out and visit us. You know, lived in the US. She lived in Los Angeles from about 1959. And never came back to South Africa, but never came back to live in South Africa, but she would come out frequently on holiday. Her mother, my grandmother, lived next door to us, so she'd come to where we were growing up, and then we'd also go to the east coast of South Africa. So, incredibly down to earth, no airs and graces, you know, everything was no makeup, and just completely relaxing from her life in the US in the entertainment industry. And I'd probably say that sort of maybe when I was around 10 did I start realizing, well, firstly, she came out to South Africa with her Las Vegas show, and she performed, she came out 2 years in a row, and we went up to Johannesburg to watch her perform. And then the more I said my name, because it's kind of an interesting thing when you have the same name as someone famous, and you'd say, "Oh, my name is Juliet Prowse," and then I would get this like, "Oh, you know, there's this famous dancer actress by that name," and yeah, I initially was a bit shy. I didn't say anything, but I eventually was just started saying, "Oh, yes, she's my aunt," and you know, now that I've written the book, I'm like, I can, you know, I'll just elaborate so that people understand, you know, what she did and how wonderful she was as an aunt.
Yes, and you know, it really is a wonderful book, and and you can tell the love with which you write it, you know, and I just want the listeners to know how the book came about, like what made you want to write this book? Because I understand you found a red suitcase full of
Yes.
letters. Can you talk about that?
Sure. So I never thought I'd write a book about my aunt. I wasn't a writer, but I do come from a marketing and communications background. And it was when my parents were downsizing to a retirement home, that there was a red suitcase full of newspaper articles. And then so I started like documenting the quotes. She went to London in the 50s, and I thought, what was it like going to London? She was only 17, and you know, could I see anything about her life? And then the more I sort of unpacked the articles, I mean, there were probably about 300 articles and programs from the show she was in, and photographs, publicity photographs. The letters, I read about the letters in the newspaper article, but I didn't have letters to start with. I only
Oh,
had
okay.
the articles, and
Mhm.
only when we were allowed to fly, in from the COVID,
Oh.
I flew to the US and to interview people. I interviewed people in New York and in LA and Las Vegas.
Mhm.
And in a Las Vegas garage was a box of 640 letters,
Wow.
mostly written by Juliet to her mother, my grandmother,
Oh.
but also some by her managers and a secretary she had. She had this lovely, feisty secretary in the 60s. And so I got that halfway through the project, but it was a fantastic find, because what had started happening is I started feeling a little bit of an imposter syndrome.
Mm.
I'm not a dancer. I am athletic, but I realized I was starting to write before I got the box of letters, I was in a phase where people were alive and there, and I needed to write the truth. I
Mhm.
couldn't fabricate stuff, and then the letters and the interviews just gave me that information that I needed. So I came back to South Africa and then kind of rewrote the book in a way. With a much better book
Yeah.
because I had her words as to what she felt,
Yes.
about different romances, or what it's like as a
Mhm.
professional wanting to do the best work possible, and how
Mhm.
challenging it actually is
Yes.
in the entertainment industry.
Yes, and what I also found so interesting, I mean, a couple different things. Of course, when you had reached out to me and the name, of course, the name, I knew the name. I knew, I was very, very little. But I was telling you off camera that my father absolutely loved her, and he would talk about her, and I had mentioned to you, and you speak a little bit about it in here, the legs commercial, the legs pantyhose
Yes.
commercial that she was I came to know her from was the legs pantyhose commercial. And that's when my father would talk about what a beautiful dancer she was, and he loved to see things that she was in. And so when you wrote to me that you were her niece, I was like, "Oh my gosh," I had wished my father was still alive, so cuz he would just, first of all, I'd love to have read this and just be excited to know that I was speaking to you. But what I loved, about it too, about your book, and I said this earlier, it's just filled with so much love. Like I just feel that. I feel that, when you're reading it, you tell it, but it's not like this tell-all book. So often somebody writes a book about somebody, whether they're related or not. It becomes this, let me tell their deepest, darkest secrets, and what I love about this is like you were saying, you're talking about her career and what it was like for her as a woman, and the trajectory of her career during this time, which brings me to this question. How old you said she was 17 when she left home, 16, 17 years old?
Yes, so when the interesting part is that she was 12 when her dance teacher in her small town said, "We
Hmm.
can't teach her. We've got to the end of what we can teach
Hmm.
her. She needs to go to Johannesburg," where fortunately there was a very good uh, dance instructor or dance school
Hmm.
that produced a number of talented dancers. And Juliet started performing for them at 14. This was
Oh,
about
right.
50 minutes away, an hour away,
Hmm. Hmm.
and longer by bus. And she started going to dance class when she was 12 on her own. It was a different era,
Wow.
you know,
Yes.
and started performing for them. And so by the time she was 16, actually her school marks, she was in performances in different South African cities, and her school marks kind of reflected that she was definitely more focused on dance. And so
Hmm.
at
Yeah.
17, she decided to go to London. The interesting thing, she's a trained ballet dancer, and her
Hmm.
dream was to become
Mm.
to forward her career as a ballet dancer,
Ballet dancer.
only to realize that she was too tall, and that
Hmm.
Sadler's Wells in London only took in trainees at 13.
Hmm.
So her dreams are kind of squashed, but she got advice to go and do modern, and that's
Yeah.
actually I call her a modern jazz dancer.
Mhm. Yes,
Um,
yes, yeah,
that's how her career
yeah.
took off.
I like to point that out too, because again, I want the listeners to remember, we're talking back, like you said, right in the 50s, 60s, it's a different era than it is today. And while dancers might be facing similar struggles, this is a woman alone who, if you look at the trajectory and history of dance, you know, ballet, and now I don't want to get like a lot of comments from listeners, but this is a fact. Ballet was looked upon as a little more respectable than the entertainment world that
Yes.
Juliet, your aunt, went into. While we love it at that time, at that time it was looked at, so that seemed to be a more, respectable career for a young woman, was a ballet dancer. And so it's so interesting to read the book and to learn about how much she, like so many dancers like her, love the art form and just want to perform. They live to dance, live to perform, live to move their body like they're taught. And it's just yeah. So do you want to talk about that a little bit? Because it's just was a different world and time she was starting her career in.
Yes. So really, ballet had taken off sort of in post World War II, and London was a hub, and
Mhm,
obviously Russian ballet, and so Margot Fonteyn was like the gold standard, and really was one of Juliet's idols. Um,
mhm,
but um, I would, yes, if it's you just go into the era, if you think of sort of the early 50s or mid 50s, they weren't really even movies were different there. The
yes.
movie musical was more, I call it a bit more twee, a little bit. It was by the mid 60s, those movies were really not current with how, it's
Mhm,
particularly the US was, and what the US
mhm,
was experienced socially. So
mhm,
yeah, I think ballet was really how most dancers visualized their route to, let's say,
mhm.
uh, fame, and doing. I think certainly Juliet, I would imagine most dancers actually just want to do amazing work and work with
Yes,
amazing choreographers and on amazing
yes.
productions. Um, but I'd say so. I have a quote I know in the book specifically. Bob Fosse said that he'd missed the movie musical in
Mhm,
1951, and Juliet
mhm.
certainly then was really at the tail end of any possible movie musicals. So dancers had to really, I think they still do, sort of hustle and find where the
Yes.
opportunities are and what they could do. And fortunately, she um, I feel that she got compliments and support fairly early on. So she went to two of the good dance teachers in London, and the
Mhm,
one had said to her she's got a lot of talent. And I think it helped her realize that she actually was a talented dancer,
mhm,
and then incredibly hardworking, and by the time she got to the US, she'd lived in London, Paris, Italy, and Spain, and she'd worked
wow.
sort of in revue theatre. And
Mhm,
and then her big break, as I say in the book, is she went to see a show that Hermes Pan, Fred Astaire's
mhm.
choreographer, was choreographing, and they became friends. And 18
Mm,
months later, he was working on the movie Can Can, where she got her original role was principal dancer. But then when she
mhm.
met the producer, she got upgraded to her first speaking role.
Wow. Isn't that, I mean,
I don't think she
it's
says
just
a whole hell of a lot, but yeah.
yeah, it's just amazing, even when I'm listening to you talk about the trajectory, it is, it's like where you are and who you meet and network with, and you might just happen to go to something like she happened to go see this show, and she met, Fred Astaire's choreographer, and it's just, and that area, I just find this so wonderful because it connects me to my dad. Even when you bring up Fred Astaire, my dad had those movies on in our household. I love That's what brought me into dance, was my father watching those old black and white movies, then the color movies, and he would call me in to show them to me, and I just loved those old time musicals and all those things. And so you live that through, or at least I do, reading this book about her and her life. Talk about then when she meets Fred Astaire's choreographer, she gets into this movie, and then what? Then what happens? And how old are you at this time? Like, where are you in this whole?
So I'm
Are
not
you
born
not
yet.
born yet? You're not even born yet. So
I
she's
was
having you're not even born yet. And remind me, is she, I don't recall, is she an only child or does she have
no,
siblings?
she's my dad's sister. She's my dad's younger sister.
Right. Okay. 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 Right.
So I was
Yes.
born in the late 60s. So this is all happening in the late. I mean, she gets to the US in 59, and the movie comes out in 1960, and um, I think what helped her career, but I mean, is that Frank Sinatra was in Can Can, and he took a shine to her. There's a scene in Can Can where he's singing to her character. His love interest is Shirley MacLaine's character, but he ends up kissing my aunt, which is not in the script. And,
Oh no.
and then but my aunt keeps it cool so that, not to let on, but she's 21 years younger than him. But
Mhm,
how I say it helped her career is that he was doing the Frank Sinatra specials. He was doing 4 shows, and
mhm,
by the time he did the movie with her, he was on to the second show.
mhm.
They were like hour-long television specials, and
I
so
see.
she got asked to perform on that. And amazingly, I found she did 4 dance numbers on that, which
Wow.
which was, more than normal as such.
Yeah.
I know I've just yeah, so from that, her profile, her romance with Sinatra, her profile was raised, but she then she was in a 20th Century Fox. She had a contract. She had a 7-year
Mhm.
contract. She didn't want to sign a 7-year contract, but it became sort of like you sign it or nothing.
Right.
And
Right.
the next movie was with Elvis Presley,
Mhm.
and that also because Elvis was more like 2 years older than her. He was the young Elvis who just come out of the army and fun, and so Sinatra was off on
Yeah.
tour, so she was kind of dating them at the same time,
Wow.
and that really sort of helped kind of raise her media profile.
Yeah.
Um, but she was very frustrated at 20th Century Fox after that because she's not really a movie star. She never trained as to do sort of
Mhm,
screen, movies. And what she was missing was being on stage. She
mhm.
loved being on stage, and it was a battle with 20th Century Fox because they don't, they
Right.
kept saying to her. So the Irma La Douce
Mhm.
had been on Broadway, I think, in 1961,
Okay.
and um, she was wanted for Irma La Douce in Las Vegas, and she kept asking 20th Century Fox, and they kept saying to her, "Is it good for your career? Is it good for you?"
Ah,
And she was like,
yeah.
"Ah!" And she just wanted to get back on stage, and
Yeah.
she eventually did, and then she eventually decided to just break the contract with 20th Century Fox.
Wow. And
Um,
then I'm sorry, go ahead. Finish what you were saying.
Yeah, no. That was just one of the things that I knew she was a kind of a determined woman, but I think putting the book together made me realize that uh, she she if it didn't work for her, she would decide to chart her own course and create her own opportunities. So she wasn't someone to sort of wait around and wait around.
Yeah.
So. Me broke
Yeah,
out and
which
started out.
which which is wonderful, and it's so, it's so relevant to dancers today and their careers. They have to be in charge of their own career. Like, if you don't speak up, you don't want to, you have that attitude, you don't want to offend, you don't want to question the choreographer, what have you. However, if you don't speak up about, or even question, I think it's a little more acceptable now. I could be, again, I don't want to step on anybody's toes out there listening, but the interviews I've had with different dancers, talking about how they, really advocate for themselves and their career, and they have to, and it's becoming more acceptable. And it sounds like your aunt was doing that. Like she really saw the need to advocate for herself. What do you happen to know what the repercussions for were when she broke the contract? Because
Yes.
I
So
just
so
imagine at that time, you know.
Well, so there were things like, so because she was in a contract with them when she did Irma La Douce in Vegas, and Vegas paid incredibly well. They wanted a cut of what she got,
Ah, right. Mhm.
and she was like, they did nothing to get her that opportunity,
Mhm.
so she was getting opportunities without them, and so it
Mm.
became a bit of a disagreement. So she was on the Perry Como show, and that I think that fee was like $10,000 in 1961.
Mhm.
Anyway, so they started disagreeing, and so Juliet with her manager actually actually sued 20th Century Fox, and
Wow.
they countersued, and then they wanted to
Mhm.
deport her because she was a South
Oh,
African,
mm,
and that's when she started her own company. So she was kind
wow,
of like,
and
she didn't have to pay them in the end. She had to,
mhm,
I can't quite remember, but it was a bit of a sting, but she rather moved
yeah,
on, and y- her aim was then to produce musical theatre as well as
mhm,
produce her own act. So,
yeah,
I mean, supper clubs were still a thing, and supper clubs
yes,
was
mhm,
were,
mhm,
I mean, for the modern listener, they
mhm,
were elegant and
yes,
refined.
mhm,
The dress of the early 1960s with big bands, and
mhm,
um, I mean, interestingly, so they were, they were different supper clubs in, besides Las Vegas show, in New York,
mhm,
and she wanted to create an act which she could do at these different clubs. So
yes.
that's what she did. Yeah, she did.
Which is amazing. I mean, it's amazing to know that. And again, go back a little bit and talk about that because I never realized. And again, like I said, I was like so little, and my dad, like I said, watching these movies that she was from South Africa. I had no idea. She has a very interesting background. So South African and Indian, is that correct? Can you talk about her
So,
background?
yes, so my grandmother lived in India. I've
Mm-hmm.
happened to have done my family tree, and realized that my grandmother's family, that side of the family, so yeah, Juliet's mother, actually,
Mm-hmm.
the relatives had lived in India for 150 years. So, but they
Wow.
were British, originally British. So it was the East
Mhm.
India Company, that kind of stuff.
Yes,
So,
yes.
both my grandmother, my aunt and dad were born in India, and then her father got pancreatic cancer. Not pancreatic. That was what Juliet got eventually. Got
Mhm.
colon cancer when he was 35 and died in
Mm.
1940.
Wow.
And
That's
with
so wow.
World War II's having started,
Mhm.
um, my grandfather's family, also British, had immigrated to South Africa. So
Mhm.
my grandmother, with her two little kids, Juliet was 3.5 and my dad was 7 years old, got on a ship and came to South Africa. So she only
Wow.
technically lived in South Africa for about 14 years because she came as a
Wow.
3-year-old, left as a
Yes.
17-year-old. But
Yes.
she was,
Okay.
I mean, obviously, as I said, I live in South Africa, and I've had different book talks here, and
Mhm.
it's South Africans claim her, so
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, I
that.
bet. I bet. Yeah.
So your dad's age, I'm meeting them, and they're delightful. My two delightful audiences are the dancers I'm meeting, and who remember her, and then let's say the elderly people who remember her
Yes.
and remember the era, and
Yes.
get all excited when I talk about her and show some videos and
Yes.
things.
Yes, I bet. So and talk about that. So talk about then when when you were old enough to, well, first talk about your relationship with her. When she would come back to visit, and then how you were close and how you realized, who you're named after, and talk about that trajectory.
So I am. I've got three brothers, and
Mhm.
she would come back. As I said, it was really a time for her to relax, and actually, even as a person in LA, she was a very down to earth person, and no airs, no airs and graces really.
Mhm.
And I think the dancers loved that about her. She made sure that her company felt like a family. So when she came to
Yeah.
South Africa, she'd arrive with just love and enthusiasm, and she was a comedic, a funny, amusing woman, and with this American accent for us, and would arrive arrive with American maybe toys or different things,
Mhm,
so she was kind of exotic for us, and
mhm.
funny and amusing, and she would do yoga in the garden before yoga was a
Mhm.
thing. Because
Right.
she So Shirley MacLaine and Margaret and my aunt would fly Bikram, hot yoga. He'd
Wow.
fly. They'd
Mhm.
fly him to Vegas because,
Oh my
to
gosh.
help them with their dancer's body.
Wow.
Yeah. So she would just be wonderful and loving and fun. We um we're a fairly sporty, competitive family, so we would
Mhm.
play every evening on holiday. We would play this card game that has 7 rounds,
Uh-huh.
and I talk about the Prowse competitive spirit that would come out.
Yes.
It's, I probably to say, so we all loved it and found it lots of fun, and then I'm unfortunately not supple enough and not graceful enough, but I am athletic, and I got a running scholarship to the University of Nebraska. So
Mhm.
I came out in the 80s and 90s, and my first port of call was to fly to LA and spend 2 weeks there with her. And she took me on, to
Mhm.
Disneyland and Universal Studios and things
Mhm.
like that. And then I flew up to Nebraska. But of all my time with her, we've hardly had any disagreements.
Mm.
So she's just an easygoing and uh, a wonderful person. And I say in front of my book, in the intro of my book, if you're only gonna have one aunt, this is the
Mm.
one. This
It's
is the
the one
one
to
to look.
have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's just because I say that because of her sort of loving, generous spirit that she
Mhm.
had. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and it comes across in the book. So when you were at university and people would hear your name, were they making the connection? What was happening then?
So the interesting thing, because I've lived in 3 different countries. So I lived in South Africa, then I lived in the US, and then I lived in the UK.
Oh.
And in the US, people were also making the connection. So it would be as simple as the passport control, or the post
Mhm,
office, or they would know the name. Um, I mean, if you were an Elvis fan, she was
mhm.
in, the GI Blues. But she was in Vegas for 21 years. She had her show, and it was called the Juliet Prowse Show.
Oh, yeah.
So
Mhm,
from 1962 to 1983, she
mhm,
had a show. So
mhm.
she was well known.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing in the UK, as much as she was very young in the UK, but she did do Sweet Charity in London,
Mm.
and she did fill in for Ginger Rogers. Actually, did Mame. Yeah,
Wow.
I mean the age difference is huge. So Ginger's, was
Yeah.
the right age, and
Mhm,
Juliet was very young Mame, but she did
mhm,
fill in for Ginger Rogers
mhm,
in Mame, and then did her show, her Vegas show in at the London Palladium.
mhm.
But people in the UK didn't make the link. Only Elvis fans made the link to
Made the
my
li
aunt.
Isn't that interesting?
Yes.
So interesting, but, it's, what a life, and then to be the keeper of the legacy, so to speak, right? I think is a beautiful thing. What was it like for you going back through those articles, through the letters, interviewing the people you interviewed, and the people that you interviewed in here is wonderful. But what was it like, taking that journey to write about your aunt?
So as I said, I started with the newspaper articles, and I would say almost all. There was one sort of incident where the reviews were not It was
Oh,
really a bit funny, but so generally it was like great review, great review, great review. And I remember looking at that going, this doesn't make a rounded person, because that's not life. Life doesn't quite work that way. Um, so when I got the letters, and yeah, so when I got the letters, I got the rounded
mm,
human,
mhm.
I got the insight.
Sure.
So
She's writing to her mom. I mean, you can't
was
get
writing to
more
her mom.
more vulnerable than that.
Yes.
Mhm.
I mean, just to say, because my own mother was like, she didn't believe that there were letters from my aunt,
Oh,
and how they ended up back in the US is my aunt took them back to the US in the 1990s, and I
okay.
think, well, I actually read about it in an article. I knew there were letters, and I thought they were lost forever,
Yeah.
and I think she was planning to write an autobiography.
Oh,
So
okay.
that,
That
yeah,
makes sense, right.
yeah. So when I mean, I don't know if people realize, but 640 letters to go through. Some of them were those skinny, airmail letters, but some of
Mhm.
them were like 8 pages long.
Wow.
And
Wow.
so I spent quite a long time going through them and dictating sort of the salient points.
Mhm.
And there were times I just laughed out loud at her. She had lots of, she was a fun, just a funny woman, like as an amusing woman. And there are times that I cried.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a chapter in there. Well, there are a few things in there that, and one I think is very particular to anyone in the entertainment industry, where you think it's going great and then you're expecting all the opportunities to roll in and maybe they don't, and
Yes.
what it's like dealing with that. um but also in her personal life, she's very honest with her mother, and so I laughed and I cried
Yeah.
about some of the things that she wrote. I do think letter writing is a lost art, and
I agree.
it's quite unfortunate
Mhm.
to realize that there's not the written word the way it was,
Yeah.
because
I
it's quite
agree.
special.
I was thinking of that just last night actually, just from what we've watered down, not even watered down, we've just taken away with all the texting, and I was talking about how misreading texts, or how you take somebody's text, but with letter writing, if somebody's pouring out their heart and soul to you, or if they're even just writing, it was so eloquent, or they would describe what was happening, where texting, you're just chip, 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 to the point. And sometimes you're giving an emoji, and sometimes I'm like, what does that emoji even mean? I don't even know what that means. So I agree with you. And I've also I've been watching The Gilded Age. I don't know if you've watched that show. But
Haven't you? Right.
oh my goodness, and they of course have to write letters then, or just the way they speak to one another, and I was thinking about that very same thing, like we've just taken so much away from our own being. I think.
It's also that it's time stamped.
Mhm.
And so it's time stamped, and so it can be in a letter, or even one of the photographs that I have in the book. It's she writes, she signs it for her mother, and she says, "To my mom, you're all to me in life."
Oh
And
yeah.
because the photograph is from a Sweet Charity,
Mhm.
that will be around 1967,
Mhm.
and it's just that it's yeah, it's time stamped and it's there for you to see, and it's, I'm quite a
Yeah.
nostalgic person, so I
Yeah, which is
love,
wonderful. Yeah.
yeah, I love that. And um I've recently connected with someone who wrote, I want to say, Jack Cole's um uh, uh, a biography, or
I don't know.
yeah.
Mhm.
um and I could go back into the letters, and find stuff that she said
Mhm.
about him.
Wow.
That was yeah, it was another one of her idols, actually,
Yeah.
as yeah.
Yeah. And there's something too, I think, about seeing someone's handwriting,
Yes.
right?
Or as simple as how she addresses and ends her letters to her mother. My dearest
Mm.
darling mom and dad, your loving
Oh,
baby, Julie.
oh, yeah. Yes, right?
Yeah, so yeah, I don't know. I love I don't know. I've
Yeah.
so I've loved the project. I've loved connecting with her. Um, uh, I knew her as a person, but
Hmm.
especially if there's this, what do we have about I think a 31-year
Hmm.
age gap.
Yes, right?
We're almost born on the same birthday.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, we're 2 days apart.
Hmm.
But you're young, so you know this
Yes.
adult, but you
Yep.
don't know the detail that they went through
Hmm.
and the things that they went through. And
Yes.
so reading her words really made me reconnect with her.
Mhm.
And then in some ways reconnect with my time in the US when
Mm.
when I was writing aspects for the book of spending
Yeah.
time with her. Um,
Yeah.
you know.
It's interesting, and like I had said when we first got on too, you see this inner workings and the relationship that you have, even though you don't talk a lot about it, you talk about it in bits and pieces, but you I felt the love. Like I felt like you really cared what was put on the pages and you really cared for her the way you
Yes.
were writing. And not everybody does that when they write a letter. I mean, write a book. So I find it evident. Can you talk about, when she became ill? Because that I didn't know about. Again, I think it was just because I was probably so little, when she became ill
Yeah,
and yeah.
some people don't know that she's passed already, and
Mhm.
they'll say, "Oh, she would be 88 if she was around."
Okay, 88.
Um,
Mhm.
yeah, so she's that age. Um,
Mhm.
she died. She got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. So as I said, her father got colon cancer at age
Mhm.
35.
Mhm. Oh
And so
gosh.
she was diagnosed probably at age about almost 57 with
Wow.
pancreatic cancer.
Mhm.
Um, and uh, she first had surgery and then she had chemo and
Mhm.
it seemed to have gone away. But then, I mean, my dad's a doctor, so he was
Oh.
kind of very pragmatic about it,
Mhm.
that it's not a great cancer to get. So
Mm.
we flew over to see her when she was actually dying. So what happened is she had some experimental treatment that
Mm.
impacted on her kidneys. So she had to have kidney dialysis regularly, weekly,
Ah,
a couple of times a week.
wow.
Um, so yeah, this beautiful, effervescent dancer was eventually sort of uh, uh, um, uh, it was actually quite poignant because we were there, and so there's a I won't go into the detail, but there's if you stop kidney dialysis, it's a very known what's going to how things are going to go,
Mm.
how long you're going to live for. And she went home, and I was with her in her LA home, and people were visiting and flowers were arriving and she was phoning people,
Wow.
and saying goodbye, which was
Wow.
very, very sweet. So I include at the end one of the phone conversation that she has with Leroy Reams, who was
Mhm.
a Tony nominated actor in 40, I think in 42nd Street. But I got someone else to read the first draft of the book, a singer who's based in New York, and she was like, she also phoned me, I was,
Oh,
I didn't include everyone's, but
yeah.
she phoned and said bye to people, which I think
Wow.
it is also as much as it's not a great disease. It
Mhm.
was sweet that she could actually phone and say goodbye to
Yeah.
people, you
That
know.
is, because not
Yeah.
everybody gets that opportunity. And that when you describe it, I can see her, like I see that, woman from the legs commercials, go, doing that.
Well,
Yeah.
it's funny when you go and interview people who've met this person, and then there's some similarities. So they'd say she, it could be one that was talking about, you know, phoning to tell the singer in New York that she's got cancer, and it was
Mhm.
almost like "Hello, darling," or "Hello, honey," or so, and
Uh-huh.
enough of them told a different story, but with this almost
Mhm.
the same intro, that she had quite a light, fun um, um,
Mhm.
uh, sort of a relationship with her singers and dancers and people that she would work with. Dancers and let's say other performers were really her tribe, and I think
Yeah.
that's where she was the most comfortable, and
Yes.
and um, she did end up, I think, yeah, being quite famous as such. But she loved the dancing more than anything. And in the late 70s, she said to one of her dancers, something like, "I would, I would live on crackers and waters, so long as I could dance." And this is
Yes.
at the end of all, not her
Yes.
success as such. So I think
Yeah.
that sort of typifies her.
Yes,
Um,
it really does. It's really a just a wonderful book, and this is such a beautiful picture of her. I from the
well,
commercials, I remember this picture,
yes.
like
So
this hairstyle,
this
I
is
should say.
this is a big debate, the cover,
Mhm.
and
Mhm. Ah.
well, I started with the kicking pick.
Uh-huh.
Um, but I only had a photograph that was slightly overexposed on
Right.
the hands. Anyway, it's interesting when you ask people's opinions. I'm very glad I eventually got the professionals' opinions
Yes.
to end up with that cover, with
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
it's beautiful. It's soulful, I think. I think it's a very soulful picture, yeah, it's really delightful. I
And
really
so, I mean, what's interesting in that picture, and just to sort of say, I do have a YouTube channel for her. So part of the project. So
oh,
why did I do this? Why did I do this project? I
mhm,
wanted her grandchildren to read about her. Um, you can read about her on Wikipedia, but you don't know the character of her, or I think
yeah,
people must try and document some of the characters of members of their family. But I
yes,
also did it to leave a legacy for her,
mhm,
that some younger dancers might know about her. I
mhm,
mean, obviously that generation, so elderly people that might want to read about her. But on YouTube, I'm adding different videos. They're not the best quality, but that I'm doing that. And I much like this photograph, I have
mhm,
some footage. She's in her 40s here in this photograph. And I've got some footage of her doing her act in Las Vegas in her 40s, and it's quite
which is great.
amazing what she did. Yeah, she
Yeah,
did like really lifts
mhm,
I mean, it's just stuff that I marvel at.
mhm,
And her act actually won awards. She won awards as the female entertainer of the year, but her act
mhm,
would be the best production sequence in a main room or
yeah.
something like that. So
I think it's great, and the fact that you have footage available that's on YouTube, I encourage listeners to go look and see. Talk about, I think if I'm remembering correctly, there was a part in the book she was injured and she danced because that's so many
oh,
dancers, we all do it, we dance through an injury. Talk about the injury and her
well,
dancing through that. I'm
she's
just,
had it's yeah, it's so many. I mean, I think I
mhm,
write in the book. I mean, for us mere mortals don't know what dancers go through.
yeah,
I really like having various
mhm,
conversations. And one of her dancers, so I mean, also to know if when she was in her 40s, some of her dancers were in their 20s.
okay, yeah,
When I went to the US, some of them were in their 60s. Who
yeah,
danced with her back in the
wow.
1970s. And one of them said, he said, "But if you're a ballet dancer, you know what pain is. You've dealt with
Mhm.
pain from the start." So
Yeah.
she's had, I mean, I was just stunned. I think she tore both hamstrings. She did a bow, or she
Mm,
did something and actually tore hamstrings, or
mm.
strained them. She often in Vegas got bronchial infections.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
I mean, this same, the same dancer spoke about the fact that in her day, in Juliet's day, you did 2 shows a night, 28 days a week, to 28
Wow.
days in a row.
A month.
It was
Wow.
super strenuous.
Yeah.
And so she had bronchial infections. Let me just think of some of the other ones. I know she had a
Did you have a
miscarriage.
rib?
She had a
Oh,
miscarriage and went on and performed. Um,
wow.
so those were no more like, let's say immediate injuries. But
Mhm.
I don't know if happens to all dancers, but she had a a hip op, a knee op, and a back
Yeah.
op.
Yeah.
So the
Wow.
first one was the first one was the back op,
Mhm.
where she, um, basically was performing on the Sunday night, and on Tuesday she was under the operating table, so it got to that
Wow.
bad. So when she was in MAME in the 1990s, so now she was in her 50s,
Mhm.
um, I think it was leading up to her hip op. So it was she first had a back, then a knee, and then the hip. But
Mm.
leading up to the hip operation, she would do MAME, and then she'd basically be on crutches until the
Wow.
next show.
Wow. It's
I'm
amazing. Isn't it
I'm
just
just
amazing?
amazed. I'm amazed at dancers, actually,
Yeah.
after doing this project and what you
Yeah.
put yourselves through.
Yeah.
You know,
Now they're trying
you
to,
tell me when I was
there's
young.
mhm.
When I was young, I remember her saying, and this is not even as as bad as some of the stuff, but she told me about spraining her ankle mid-act,
Uh,
mid-show. I don't know
yeah.
which one, and basically she couldn't get her boot onto her foot, so she had to safety pin it on.
Oh
She had to
my
pull it on,
gosh.
and then she
Wow.
couldn't zip it up, so she had to safety pin it
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh my lord,
Uh-huh. It really is. It's something the mentality that you go on and you just push through it and yeah, and it's now it's there's dancers will talk about, there's the push for taking care of their mental health more. There's a lot more available to dancers between their physical therapists, their nutrition, so much more advocacy for what's available, still hoping, but still, it's still that, you have that push, 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 and that you work your body to the bone. Not because you're like, oh, I'm going to work my body to the bone today. It's just you just keep going and going and let me do it one more time. Let me try it one more time. Let me do it again. Yeah,
yes.
yeah, it's something. But yeah, what an incredible find. I am so grateful that you reached out to me. It was just delightful. It was light, like it was light filled and light to go back and be like, wow, yes, Juliet Prowse. I remember that
Yes,
name and nothing beats a great pair of legs, right? You know?
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, I say that. And for the listeners who don't know, and I don't even know if they're around anymore, legs
It's
pantyhose. Are they around?
Well, I don't know if the pantyhose are around, but yeah, the
Yeah,
commercials,
there was
I've got
this.
one on the YouTube channel, and that's the
Yes.
jingle. Nothing
Yes,
beats
beats
a
a
great.
great pair of legs. Yeah, for listeners who aren't aware of it, you have to Google that and look it up because she was like the face of the legs of legs, and
Yes,
that's my memory of her as a little girl was like wow, and that's when my dad would talk. Like I said when we first got on, that my dad would talk about her and what a fabulous dancer and I remember vaguely, like, it's very sketchy because when anybody was ever lost in the entertainment world, like I said, my dad would watch so many movies and listen to records, and we had music on in the house all the time. My dad was always listening. He was always like, oh, he'd be read the newspaper. You read it in the newspaper at the time, or you heard it on the radio. And I remember him when he, saying that Juliet Prowse passed away,
yes, sir.
and yeah, I remember him being sad about it. Is that same, he to him she was in his time of he would be in his 90s now if he were still alive. So he
Yes.
enjoyed, yeah, yeah,
So
watching.
I've had, as I said, because I'm in South Africa, I've had more book talks and things like that, and I'll have people come up to me and say, "Oh, my dad and my brother, were
Yeah, yeah.
really thought your aunt was fabulous." Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's really it's quite sweet actually. To
Yeah,
just,
it's
I mean, I knew that anyway.
mhm.
She if when she came to let's say flew to Johannesburg, the press would be there. And
Yeah.
actually, I read in her letters, which you can definitely tell the security was different. She would book her plane not
Uh-huh.
in her name.
Oh,
You can obviously do that back
yes.
then,
Very
and
different.
only the
Can't do it
day
now, right?
before. No, 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 yeah,
Yeah.
so only the day before. She'd book it in her manager's name, and then, like, the day
Wow.
before or the day of, she'd change it into her name,
Yeah. Now
just so
she'd probably
that
have her
she
own
wouldn't.
plane, right? Yeah. Right?
Maybe. Oh, maybe.
Yeah. Wow.
I think that's not her in a way,
Yeah, right,
um,
yeah, you said yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Wow. Is there anything else you'd love to tell the listeners? Anything we haven't spoke about or covered? We definitely want them to go get the book and read the book. I'm
I
I'm just holding up the
Yeah, I think it's if you want to read a story about what it was like making it in the entertainment industry as a teenager in the 50s or into the 60s, kind of um, this story goes through the ups and downs, and it really gives a picture of what it was like. Um, I wanted to make sure I gave it a rounded view, and I also
Mhm,
wanted to be honest about her. So I didn't want to shy away. I wanted to treat it in a respectful way as to how I spoke about different things. So she worked incredibly hard and had her own company of 20 people at the end, and there were some challenges that came with being the star of the show.
mhm,
In those days, as one of her dancers said, in the 70s, shows were built around a star rather than an
mhm,
ensemble cast. And
mhm.
she felt the pressure of keep keeping well, she loved it, so I don't want to say she felt the pressure, but keeping it going.
Yeah,
Um, and really then being a wife and a mother as well.
mhm,
There are challenges in trying to do all of that.
yeah,
And so I just try and give an honest view of her as this wonderful character, but also the challenges that she faced as an entertainer and in her personal life.
yes.
Yeah,
Well,
and I hope people enjoy it. I loved
yes,
writing
I
it.
I I hope so too. I certainly did, and I really thank you, Juliet, for first reaching out to me, and then for coming on and sharing the story with us and my listeners. It's really wonderful. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you signing in from South Africa and
Thank
speaking
you.
to all of us. I look forward to a movie. I'm gonna say maybe they'll
Well,
make it into a
yeah,
movie. Wouldn't that be fun? Wouldn't that
I
be
know.
fun?
I've had a few
If
people
that
say,
yeah,
that there's a
if and
movie
when
here.
that happens, you have to come back and talk about that. So, yeah. Well, thank
Okay,
you, Juliet,
fantastic.
so much for
Thank you.
for joining me. You're
Well,
welcome.
well,
My
well,
pleasure.
thank you.
And yep, I'll put all the information in the show notes so people can look this up and get the book. And I just want everybody to read it. And I wish you well, and I wish you success with the book. And again, thank you, listeners, for listening. This is Dance Talk with Joanne Carey. Follow us, like us, and share, share, share. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Powered by Riverside.